my name is Bruno Sanchez. I'm a software developer in PayPal. And you can find me on Twitter at Bruno P. Sanchez. And if you have any questions or if you want to say hello, feel free to send an email to brunopsanchez@gmail.com. And I'm originally from Brazil. And this is actually the view I have there. And the view I have here, though, is just not talking about it. So before we go into the talk, I want to start by telling a story. 3 years ago, I came to Note Summit as a volunteer. And in order to get the tickets, I was actually helping the staff holding doors at the main room at the conference for people coming in and out. And that was cool because I could actually see all the talks. But later on, the interesting part was that at the end of the conference, at the last part, when it was over, I was about to go to a different meetup, but my friend just got my computer and was like, let's just talk to one more person. I was like, okay, and we did that. And it was cool because that was actually, that person ended up being the first person that I spoke with from PayPal. So in a sense, I actually got my job because I came to Note Summit 3 years ago. So today is a very special day to me to come here again as a speaker. Okay, so enough with the story, let's go to the talk. The talk is going to be divided into 4 parts. First, I'm going to start talking about how we scale the virtual onboarding app at PayPal from a Java app that we had before into our Node.js app. I'm just going to quickly go over this. And then I'm going to talk about the lessons that we learned and how we solved the pain points that we discovered. After that, I'm going to talk about the usability tests that we ran on a framework that we ended up developing to solve those pain points in the previous example. And at the end of the talk, I'm just going to give the current status of everything. So let's talk about scaling merchant onboarding. When you are a merchant and you want to create an account in PayPal, you go through us. Think of it as a multi-page registration form that we ask for your information. Some people might even say it's too much information. Let's not get into it all. The challenge of all of this lies when we're supporting all the different regulations that we have all over the world. And when you start supporting like 180 plus countries with varying fields, it becomes a very challenging problem. So let's look into how one of the pages is used. So basically, this is one page. A page is basically a collection of fields. And each one of the fields may or may not have like 3 static files. One for a template, another JavaScript for behaviors, and possibly one for a style, so a CSS file. And that is true for the page itself. And when I talk about flows, I'm basically talking about a collection of those pages. So the multi-form registration part. In order to handle all these varying regulations for all these countries, so different fields per country, we thought it was a good idea to use an inheritance model to share templates across these flows and share those static files as well. And as the app scaled and different product requirements came in, and we had a bunch of teams like working in parallel, what happens was this, and it works nicely when you're scaling up, but it can get very complicated when you need to do a style change across the board on all the flows, and you discover that the address field got developed in 10 different ways by 10 different people, and you have different HTML structures. So in order to solve this problem, we had to think it again. So what if we didn't have all these static files? What if we could simply configure forms and be sure that they just work on the client side. What ended up happening, it was actually a rewrite. We did a full-blown rewrite of the client and the server-side code, which ended up being F0 on the client side, this framework that we developed. And this is going to get clearer with the presentation, and name hooks on the server side to do the specialization. So this is what it talks about, React forms and specialization. We're going to start talking about React forms, which is done by F0 framework on the client side. The main idea is to minimize all the client-side code that we have. It was all developed in a very modular way, and we actually created an ecosystem around it. So it doesn't really know that PayPal exists. It's actually just a way to render forms consistently on the client side. And that way, I'm saying it was built for open source. It will allow us a lot of flexibility. So we can change, manipulate these configurations, and basically be sure that they work very well on the client side. All 100% unit tested, yes, we can actually do that. And the idea was to shift our focus of how to make things work with all those files to what really works best for our end users. So let's see an example of what these configurations are. On the left side, you're going to see the configuration of the form on the right side. It's basically an object that can define different pages, and it has an array of elements. So even the title is one of those elements. So you see page title, you can see like an email, and even like groups of fields can be reference. Select drop-downs and address group, like even like fields in different rows, you can do that. Terms and conditions, and even like the submit button. Okay, that's a lot of magic, right? Well, what if I told you just like saw one abstraction? Let's go into the details of what that actually means. So let's dig deeper in the email field, for example. It all gets expanded to a very specific object that allows you 100% configuration and control. So you can define a component, which is a text field. So both email and passwords at the end of the day are actually text inputs. And text input is also a separate module that we develop separately. It has its own tasks, and we can basically register these modules into F0 so it knows what it can render. Another attribute is, for example, validations. And validations is really an array of strings that basically point to functions that you define elsewhere. And they basically need to return true or false. So very simple interface. You can define the attributes of your component as well, and these are exact HTML attributes. So you're going to see title placeholder, for example. And when you see email.title and email.placeholder, these are actually property files that we define in a properties file, so we can have translations everywhere. And the last thing, we can define the wrapper attributes. This is really like a div that gets rendered around your input field. Then you can define your HTML attributes as well. For those of you that know Bootstrap, you will recognize this class. It's good to know that F0 does not depend on Bootstrap, but because we're using it to style things, we're just referencing the class here. So that's going to tell I want my field to be full with my code. Another couple of examples is, for example, the page title. You're going to see it points to a different component that is another module as well. So page title is an HTML block. And you're going to see the next two attributes are specific for HTML block, like the tag name and the text that is going to be printed inside. Another example is terms and conditions. It's the checkbox component. I guess you get the idea. They're all separate modules, and that's how it works. Okay, the next part of this presentation is the specialization part. So now we are very confident that we can render well-defined structured forms on the client side. So how do we do all this specialization and support all these countries throughout the world? So for this, the specialization happens on the server side. Okay? So before we serve that object to the client, we can make changes. The main idea is to eliminate those if conditions that we end up having when you're supporting so many countries. Let me give you an example of what I mean by that. So imagine you're developing the United States flow. So you need to do something specific for it, you do an if condition. And then at PayPal, we support different products for our users. So it's not crazy to imagine you would have something like if product equals product 1. And then because you made something special for product 1, the other product owner wants to be special as well. So you need to do something for product 2. And then you're done with the United States, and next sprint you need to migrate all the European Union countries. So you can have all this another if condition to check if the group of your country is in EU. And then Brexit happens, and you need to check Great Britain. And then you need to do something for product 1, and then you need to do some experimentation, and you end up with this Hadouken code. And just don't do Hadouken code. To solve this problem, main hooks comes to the rescue. The idea is to isolate business logic into very well-defined files elsewhere in your code base. This is an actual open source module, and you can find it on drupal.ps/main hooks. So now I'm going to start with a demo. But before we get into the code, keep in mind we have a controller running in our server that is basically going to load the base form that I just showed, and then it's going to resolve the abstractions and call the hooks. So it's basically going to give control to other places of the code to make their changes before it renders. That's the main idea. So now I'm just going to change it to Chrome, and I tune it a little bit with my bookmarks, and now my server is not running because, sorry about that, because demos. Let's go back here. Now my server just has started. I guess just 1 second. So now I'm going to open Brazil form. Okay. So this is actually getting rendered by 0 on the client. So if I go to Sublime Test, you're going to see this is the actual representation of the entire form that we just saw. It's basically elements with a page title, names, and our account tag, and a submit button. But no registration form is good enough without a password field. So, because I abstracted password field before, I can actually come here and just like reference it. And once my server restarts, we can just go to Brazil, and if I refresh it again, you see the field code. And this is actually a full-blown form. It has validations, like if I don't use like a capital letter, it's actually going to validate because I configured it so. Same thing for password and everything. Because I configured this form to be for a couple of flows, now I'm going to open United States flow, and you're just going to see the same thing. And now the different requirements actually, let's do something special for Brazil. Let's go to the specialization part. So when I go to my code, let me just expand this. The main idea is that we have this hooks folder in our code base. And here you can define your specific files to implement your very specific logic. And because we want to do something for Brazil, I'm just going to go to my zip file. And inside this file, you see there's a hook that is called pre-render form. So I want to do this before I render something. And you see underscore Brazil, which means I'm doing something specific for Brazil. What we need to do here is to add one field to the beginning of the form. That's all we need to do. So I'm just going to uncomment this code. And it's basically the first line is resolving an abstraction called page title, the actual same abstraction that is rendering the title right now. Then just changing the text to point to another property file that I have. And then I basically changing the form object that I have, going to my pages, the registration page, and the elements array that we just spoke about, and just unshifting my new element to the beginning of my array. This may seem a little bit complicated, but once you understand the structure, it's actually pretty straightforward. So, what it means is that if I go to Brazil now, you're actually going to see hello from Brazil, whereas if I open the United States, you won't see it, because that code is not running for the United States code. Another cool thing about hooks is that it's very common to have asynchronous logic in your code. So I'm just going to comment like another snippet of code, and you notice it's actually the same exact function, but now it's taking 3 different parameters. So if you define 3 parameters for your hook, main hooks internally is going to create a promise for you and pass you the resolve function, so you can actually resolve it instead of returning your data. So now I'm just going to comment the first hook. And what this means is that, I'm using the set time now for 3 seconds just to fake service call. It's just an asynchronous call. But we're doing the exact same thing, just adding a field in the beginning of the form. So if I go now to Chrome and I click in Brazil, you notice that it now actually takes 3 seconds for everything to run. And you still get the same thing. Whereas if I go to Great Britain, another flow that I configured other things and added it to the European group of countries, you see that it just renders right away because it's now running that code now. Alright, so this is the demo. Now, the idea of hooks is basically you have a very consistent, ordered way to call your functions. So all of these terms and permutations of all this. But this is specific for iApp. For your app, you can define your own resolution function that applies to your use cases. So a hook name is basically the pre-render form that we just said. And taking breakpoint as an example, these are all the possible functions that you would be able to call. And you can be sure they are only going to be called if it applies for a code request. Okay, that was the demo, and now I'm just going to talk about the usability tests. So we've done the usability test on this F0 framework, and it was actually done with developers. And that's what I'm going to talk about. That was tested with developers. We wanted to validate the idea of creating forms with configurations. How does developers like this idea? That's what we wanted to validate. And our documentation as well. The setup of this usability test was basically we had a script with progressive scenarios of things that people needed to do. So for example, first create a text field, then add a drop-down, and then configure validations, and abstract fields, and create a new page, and so on and so forth. We had 6 developers coming into one full day. You're actually seeing, like, you know when you're watching a movie and there's a interrogation room. We were on the other side of the mirror, just watching people like test things. We had 6 developers come in. 3 of them were interns. And on a side note, internship at PayPal is actually pretty cool. I think last week they were like in a cruise or something. I don't know why I said that. But anyway, we had 3 interns and we had 3 other more senior people coming in as well. And each person had 30 minutes to go through another interesting story about this was that the first version of the script that I wrote was very detailed. So each one of the scenarios had like a link pointing to the exact solution that people had to do. But when we came in the first day, and the usability researcher in the lab looked at it, he was like, no, let's remove this. We want to test documentation as well. And that was a great thing. And then a couple of days later, I saw this GIF and it was so funny. I think that's how I was imagining people, like, to be like trying to find things. But turns out developers are very good, like trying to find their way through documentation and fixing implementing scenarios. So now I actually want to show one of the videos that I got permission from them to play. So we got pretty good feedback. And this red dots that you're seeing is actually an eye tracking software that we have. So when people are like, you know the scenario that they're doing, and you know where they are looking at, you kind of know what they're thinking. It's a very cool experience. It's 30 seconds. Oops. Alright, it's basically saying, you can trust me, I'm an engineer. It's basically saying it's pretty cool, it was a good experience, and this video is just like doing some positive feedbacks. It was very easy to find his way through the forums. And then we had very detailed feedback as well from other people. So this is another guy, and I'm just going to play it, but he's basically saying he's concerned about the idea of it's a lot of magic, and I don't know if I have like full control over this because I'm kind of constrained into what F-Zero provides me. Yeah, the video still doesn't work. He's basically concerned about this. Which is very spot on comment actually. But at the end of the day, he basically had 30 minutes to create forms, and he was actually able to do so with no previous knowledge of F-Zero whatsoever before. Reading documentation and writing forms in 30 minutes. And after this usability test, I'm sorry about the audio, but we got a lot of very interesting feedback where we created a bunch of issues in our GitHub repo, and now we're just like tackling each one. Very cool experience. And now, just to finish the talk, the current status is basically that we have 4 teams in PayPal currently working with F-Zero, doing different projects. And we're working towards open sourcing. It's still not open source, but as I said before, it was built with it in mind, and we were working closely with the open source team at PayPal to make it available in the community. So thank you.